Shabbat Shalom. Greetings to all of you, and happy to have you joining us on this Shabbat, and welcome to those of you who are joining us online. Welcome. Good Shabbos to you. Today I'd like to continue a message that I began a couple of weeks ago. It's just the time is appropriate now. So I'd like to continue in the book of Revelation. And so we'll begin then in Revelation chapter 6. Last time I was going through the book of Revelation. I want to just briefly cover a few of these things again. The question was, where are we in the book of Revelation as far as timeline-wise? I don't mean a Revelation timeline. I mean, where are we today timeline? And when we read in the book of Revelation, where are events in the world in the book of Revelation? More specifically, can we find the beginning of the tribulation in the book of Revelation? At what point? Because the book of Revelation, it covers much more than just the tribulation period. Whether you believe the tribulation to be 3.5 years or some think it's 7, it doesn't matter. The book of Revelation covers a much wider span of time than that, including the seals and the judgments and such that begin. And so I thought I would just explore that briefly with you. So here we are then in the book of Revelation after chapter 4 and 5. Then the scroll, we find the seal judgments beginning in chapter 6. And now when the Lamb opened one of the seals and heard one of the 4 living creatures saying with a voice like thunder, "Come and see." And there was the white horse, a white horse like false religion. It looks white, it looks pure, but look what he's doing. A crown was given to him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. That's not true religion, going out to conquer like that. So that is a false religion, destruction that comes in the form of false religion. So we look throughout history. That horse has been riding for a long time. There's nothing new there. Okay, I want to move quickly here. I don't want to just give the same message as last time. The second seal, Revelation chapter 3, there's a fiery red horse went out, and it was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth. And the people would kill one another, and given him a great sword. We've been having wars and rumors of wars for a long time now. The red horse has been riding for a long time. This isn't something new. I don't think we can call that horse a beginning marker of the beginning of the tribulation period. Otherwise, it's like, the tribulation's been going on for what, 1,000 years? So we have the third seal is famine. When he opened the third seal, and there was a black horse, and he who had on it had a pair of scales in his hand, very carefully measuring. So this is about famine. Clearly, I remember when I was a little boy watching the TV and seeing, commercials advertising, please help these poor starving children in Ethiopia or various parts of the world. Famine has been going on for a long time now. That horse has been riding. Not to say that when the tribulation begins that these 4 horses aren't going to pick up their pace. But these horses it's not like, okay, the white horse rides a little bit, now he dismounts, gets off his saddle, and now it's the red horse is going to ride. No. Once the horse starts riding, he keeps on riding. He keeps on riding. Now the red horse joins in. He keeps on riding. He isn't going to stop. Now they got 2 horses riding. Then you have the third. You have the famine. That's the black horse. He keeps on riding. Now you have 3 horses riding. They've been riding a long time. And then finally we get to the 4th horse, death. When he opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature say, "Come and see." And behold, a pale horse, verse 8, Revelation 6:8. Those horses have been running for a while. And then we have the 5th seal. When he opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain. We have martyrdom. And so we see that. Okay, now I'm going to take us to the 6th seal. Revelation 6 and verse 12. Now, notice something different about this. All of the first 5 seals, we can clearly see throughout history, that has been happening. Now, I'm not to say it won't happen again or in an increased intensity or any such thing, but those things have been happening. Those are not time markers as to when the tribulation is begun in the book of Revelation. But when we get to the 6th seal, that's different. Okay, now we have Revelation 6 and verse 12. I looked when he opened the sixth seal. Behold, now take note. I'm going to share some things with you, and I'm going to fly like an eagle through this. So I hope you've got a pen ready, because I'm going to reveal some things to you that are quite interesting, and I hope everybody gets it, okay? Revelation 6:12. I looked when he opened the sixth seal. There was a great earthquake. Well, we've had earthquakes along the way, but the sun became black as sackcloth, and the moon became like blood. So now that is an incredible miracle. So we have the heavenly signs, okay? And we're just going to hold our place there for just a moment. I'll take us back. I'm not using notes today, so excuse me. It would take me maybe just a minute. But in Genesis chapter 1, Genesis 1, here we are in verse 14. Then God, the Almighty, said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs. Let the lights be for signs, as well as moed, seasons, appointed times, times that are appointed." Okay? It's not just the calendar. Each, Shabbat or each Rosh Chodesh is a new moon. Certainly it includes that. But the appointed seasons, meaning the feasts, the appointed Sukkot, Shavuot, etc. But also other appointed events. When something is appointed, when there is a time. Remember, they asked Yeshua, well, when will the end be? And about the day or the hour? And he said, only the Father knows that. Okay, there is appointed time. The Father knows that. So there are signs to reveal appointed times in history as well. They are for signs in the skies. They are for appointed times, as well as for days and years, so that you can just have a calendar and know the days and the years. But they are for these signs. So here we are back in Revelation 6 now, in verse 12. Here's the sixth seal. Now this is what happens in the sixth seal. There's a great earthquake. That's one thing. Also, it says, the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became like blood. Now, what is it that causes the moon to be bright red, but the sun to go black? I mean, that's opposite. Sometimes you might have, atmospheric disturbance and the sun goes red, but then the moon would be much darker. But here the sun goes black, and the moon is red. That is an appointed sign. These are heavenly signs, so that is to accompany a great earthquake. Also, it says, stars of heaven fell from the earth as a fig tree drops its late figs. We know that literally stars, our sun is the size of an average medium-sized star. It's not big. So I think, what is it, if I remember right, the sun is 300 times the size of the earth? I don't know if it's the exact number. I think that's about right. 300. At any rate, the point being, you can't have a star fall to the earth. The earth would vaporize long before the star got here. So I think this must be either referring to meteor showers, or more likely, what I believe, the stars is referring to fallen angels being cast out of heaven, falling to the earth when it's shaken, when they're shaken. Remember, it says, once more I will shake heaven and earth. Remember. So the heavens being shaken and causing these stars to fall, and the sky receded as a scroll when it's rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved out of its place. Okay, we're continuing on in this sixth seal. And the kings of the earth, great men, rich men, commanders, mighty men, every slave and every free man hid themselves in the caves and the rocks and on the mountains, and said to the mountains and to the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face. This is when they first see Messiah's face in the heavens. There is no question this has not happened before. There's no question that the sixth seal is part of the Great Tribulation period. The first five, we cannot say that about them, but we can about this seal. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who is able to stand? Now notice, they're asking rocks to fall on them. What would cause the mountains to shake in such a way that rocks would be falling, and they'd wish they'd fall on them? An earthquake, a great earthquake, which we read about, this great earthquake back in verse 12 that accompanied the heavenly signs of the sun and the moon. Okay? Now I want to show you another time marker. We're going to go back now. We'll come back maybe if we have time to the book of Revelation again. But right now I'd like to drop back into Matthew, the book of Matthew, chapter 24. Matthew 24. They asked him, they sat on the Mount of Olives, verse 3. The disciples came to him privately, said, tell us, when will these things be? What things? Well, they were sitting there talking about the temple, about how it was decorated with these stones and how fantastic it was. And Messiah said, well, there won't be one stone on top of another that won't be thrown down. So they're asking about the destruction of the temple. They wanted to know, when will these things be? When's the temple going to be destroyed? It was destroyed in 70 A.D. It was not an end-time event. There is no temple today. That can't be an end-time event, obviously. So I want you to understand, please, this is a span of time that they're asking about that spans from 70 A.D. until the return of the Messiah. So we can't read Matthew 24 and say Matthew 24 is all about the latter days and the end times. That would absolutely be foolish. It's just wrong. It's just wrong. So part of it is, but part of it isn't. So they wanted to know, tell us about these things. And the second point, or the second question, what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? So now we got it. The span which started in 70 A.D. And it finishes at the return of the Messiah. So Yeshua answered them, take heed that no one deceives you. Many will come in my name, saying, I'm Messiah, and they will deceive many. There's your white horse. False religion. We have what's called the Inquisition. Spanned a long time. The Inquisition. False religion. Many wars were fought by the hand of religion. False religion. There's your white horse. It's been riding a long time. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. There's your red horse. We read about the second seal. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. Those are the beginning of sorrows. You had famines, verse 7. There's your black horse. Perfect. And notice that the order that they are listed in is exactly the order that they are spelled out in the book of Revelation. It's important. You have the pestilence, death, famine, diseases. In the exact order, you have the four horses. They will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you'll be hated by all nations for my name's sake. Okay? There's your fifth seal. Now, perhaps I'll come back here to Matthew, but let's just hold our place. Let's keep going a little bit in Matthew, and then I'll take you over to Luke's account. I want to share something else with you. So we're up to the fifth seal now, as Messiah is going through here, Matthew 24. These events have already happened. They are history. Doesn't mean those horses have been dismounted. They're still riding, but they began a long time ago. They are not indicators of the tribulation. As a matter of fact, isn't that what Messiah said? You'll hear of wars and rumors of wars, but don't be alarmed. The end is not yet. Okay, those are not end-time timeline markers. Lawlessness will abound. People will think, God's laws don't matter. God's laws are done away with. And the love of many grows cold as a result. You cannot have love without God's law. And the gospel, the good news of the kingdom, will be preached in all the world as a witness to all nations, and then the end will come. Therefore is a change. Now he's changing. That is a shift in his conversation. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whosoever reads, let him understand. That is different. Now that is an end-time marker of the tribulation. Then, at that time, let those who are in the mountains flee. And let him who is in the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Let him who is in the field go back to get his clothes. or not go back, excuse me. Now, I want to share something with you. I think I'll go back to Luke's account in just a little bit, but let's drop back now to the book of Daniel, okay? It's very important that you understand, if you're going to understand the relevance of these things as it marks today, that we understand how the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel plays out in the time frame. So we are at Daniel chapter 12 now. Okay, Daniel chapter 12 and verse 1. At that time Michael shall stand up, that great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation. The same thing that Matthew said. There's never been a time this bad before. So Matthew said it. Daniel says it. They're talking about the same time. There cannot be two times in history that are the worst times in history. You can't have two that are both the worst. So, even to that time, and at that time, your people shall be delivered. That's God's promise. That is a testimony. Everyone who is found written in the book, and many of those who sleep in the dust. He talks about this. So they will shine like the brightness of the firmament. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal it until the time of the end. Verse 4. At the end time, it will be clear. At the end time, it will be revealed. At some point in the end. Then I, Daniel, looked, and there stood two others, one on this riverbank and the other on that riverbank. These two others, who are they? It doesn't say. Perhaps they are the two witnesses. I believe they are, but it doesn't say. So we'll just have to accept that there are two others. That's all, just mentions that they're there. That's all it says. And one said to the man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the river. That's a third individual. Okay? The one who was above the waters, he asked him, above the waters, obviously it was an angel. He said, how long shall the fulfillment of these wonders be? And I heard the man who was clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven, and he swore by him who lives forever, that it shall be for time, times, and half a time, 3.5 years, and when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered or scattered. It's the same thing, like if you take a window pane of glass and you shatter it, it breaks into little pieces and scatters. It's the same thing. Then all these things will be finished. And although I heard, I didn't understand. So I said, that's not enough information. So he asked again, Lord, what shall be the end of these things? It's closed until the time of the end, verse 9. Many will be purified and made white and refined, but the wicked will do wickedly, and none of the wicked will understand, but the wise will understand. Will we be wise? And so now he's giving wisdom. And here is wisdom in verse 11. And from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away, and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Now, this is important because we saw in the book of Matthew that the abomination of desolation being spoken by the one spoken of by Daniel the prophet, when it's in the holy place, then it's time to flee. Let those in Judea get out. And immediately after that, in Matthew's account, we immediately saw what? The heavenly signs. Okay? Right after the abomination of desolation, then we went right into the heavenly signs. That's important. I'm going to share something with you. This abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet starts exactly 30 days prior to the beginning of the tribulation. 30 days prior, or excuse me, I want to clarify the way I worded that. When the sacrifice is taken away and the abomination that makes desolate is set up, which is what takes the sacrifices away, when that event happens, that is 30 days prior to the beginning of the tribulation. Now, why do I say that? I will show you. So we have 1,290 days. Normally in Scripture, you'll read about 1,260 days, like you do in the book of Revelation. 1,260 days, do the math, is exactly 3.5 years. 1,290 days is 3.5 years plus 30 days. Now, we read the next verse. Blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,335 days. What's that? Well, that is an event that happens 45 days prior to the sacrifices being stopped. Just do the math. When are all these days counted from? I'll show you. It's in the next verse. Daniel 12 and verse 13. But you go your way till the end, for you will rest and you will rise to your inheritance at the end of the days. The days in the context are the 1,290 and the 1,335. So the end of the days, he will rise to his inheritance. That would be the seventh trump. When the seventh trump blasts, the resurrection takes place, Daniel will rise up. Okay, so from that point, that's the seventh trump. That's Messiah's return. Tribulation is, he's here on the earth now. He's not up in heaven. I mean, his feet are on the Mount of Olives. That's when the seventh trump takes place. The dead are resurrected. You count from that. That's the end of the tribulation. You count from that forward 1,290 days, and it puts you 3.5 years plus 30 days prior. For the 1,335, it just goes 45 days further. So I'm showing you, this is why we believe that the abomination of desolation, the sacrifices being taken away, is a time marker 30 days prior to the tribulation, because we know in Revelation and in other places, well, even right here in verse 7, it says, well, how long will these things be? Time times and half a time, that's 3.5 years. 1,290 is 3.5 years plus a month. Now, why is this important? I'm getting up to the whole crux of it now, why it's important. We see then the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel. The sacrifices are taken away. That will be 30 days prior to the tribulation beginning. Okay, that's a point. Point 2, we see the heavenly signs. The moon like blood, the sun blackened out. We see the heavenly signs as clearly the tribulation has already begun. That's the beginning of the tribulation, or at least somewhere early on. The tribulation has begun. It's about to begin. It is during the tribulation, in the early on portion of it, but maybe it's a month in or a day in or 2 months in. I don't know, but the tribulation has begun already when you have the heavenly signs. That's indisputable. We've seen that. Now, here's the point, and I want to share this with you. We have the heavenly signs where we have a blood moon, a red moon. But in Revelation, it lists three. It lists, first, the sun will be black. That's the order that they're listed in. The sun will be black first. Completely black. Then we have the moon being red. In that order. Also, we have the great earthquake. Okay, I'll show you a little bit about the great earthquake in a moment. But on March 20th, 2015, on March 20th, 2015, we have a complete solar eclipse. where the sun will become black. Okay? Now, do we have shortly thereafter the moon becoming red? Yes, we do, as a matter of fact. Exactly 2 weeks later. Exactly 2 weeks later, we have a blood moon, where the moon will be red. It's called a blood moon because it will be red. Now, friends, listen, I'm just going to share this with you, okay? I make no claims to be a prophet and to be giving you. I'm trying to help us to watch. I realize that God can fulfill this in another way. You know, how is he going to fulfill it? How is he going to make the sun go black and the moon turn red? Well, you know what? God can just like wipe out the sun and then make the moon red. Normally, the sun is shining. That's what makes you see the moon. So if the sun's blacked out, how are you going to see the moon at all? Well, there is one way. Probably, I'm sure God has many ways. But at least consider this as a possibility, okay? This is not a prediction. It's an encouragement to watch. It's something to consider. That on March 20th, we will have the sun go black. 2 weeks later, we have the moon turn red. We do have technical fulfillment of those heavenly signs. And we got the dates listed on our calendars. Okay, it's just a mathematical reality. If that doesn't get your attention, I really don't know what will. It's something to watch. Now, consider this, please, okay? Because this is important. Now, we know that March is, well, let's see, what is it? Late August, September, October, November, December, January, February. 6 months. 6 months and a half. 6 months and 20 days, something. Until we have the complete blacking out of the sun. Okay, so 6.5 months. Now, we understand from the scriptures that the abomination of desolation, the sacrifices will be stopped 30 days prior to the beginning of the tribulation. We saw in Matthew the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet is an event that occurs before these heavenly signs. If the heavenly signs are to begin on March 20th, and we know we got 30 days minimum of time, which is used up because Daniel's 1290, it's 30 days prior to the tribulation. That backs us up a month. Now we're just about 5.5 months' time. If March 20th, where the sun goes black, 2 weeks later when the moon turns red, if those are the heavenly signs, and they do qualify, technically they meet the letter of the word, of the law, or, then we should be looking for the sacrifices to be reinstated because, friends, in order for the sacrifices to be stopped, they first have to be reinstated. And something like that does not happen instantly. It takes a little bit of time and a little bit of preparation to set up an altar. They do not have to have a temple. All they need is an altar. But that means you've got like a 5-month period. If we see the sacrifices be reinstated in the next few months, that would be very interesting indeed. If the heavenly signs beginning March 20th are the ones God's going to use, and they certainly meet the standards, that gives us a very short window of time. Now let's go to Luke chapter 21. Luke chapter 21. Verse 5, some spoke of the temple, Luke 21:5. Oh, how it's adorned. It's beautiful stones. And look at the donations, because they were watching how there was a certain poor widow that put her 2 mites in. You read about that just a couple verses ahead. They're watching the donations are being made, and look at these beautiful stones. Oh, it's gorgeous. And verse 6, as for these things, Yeshua said, which you see, the days will come in which not one stone will be left upon another that will not be thrown down. So they asked him, saying, Teacher, Rabbi, when will these things be? When will the stones be thrown down? One question. And what sign will there be when these things are about to take place? So Yeshua begins to go down. Luke's account is the same as Matthew. You have false religion, many coming in my name saying, oh yeah, Jesus is the Christ. But they're deceiving. You'll hear of wars and rumors of wars. That must come to pass, but the end is not immediately. Verse 9. Nation will rise, ethnos against ethnos. In other words, not just nation, but it also means racial warfare. This race against that race. Ethnos, ethnicity, and kingdom. Alliances of ethnos, alliances of people, alliances of kingdoms. There will be also, look at what he says here in verse 11, great earthquakes, famines and pestilences. There's your third and your fourth horse, but also he mentions great earthquakes. Now look at the time frame that we find in Luke 21. They'll have the great earthquakes, fearful sights, great signs from heaven, verse 11. You see that? Now, verse 12, notice the verbiage. But before all these things, in other words, this is out of time sequence now. This is going back before all these things. Before what things? Well, before these fearful signs, these great signs and the earthquakes. Before all those things, there's going to be the fifth seal. There's going to be some martyrdom, some persecution. People will be brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake, like the Apostle Shaul was and others. It'll turn out as an occasion for a testimony. But there's your earthquakes. And you'll be hated by all, but not a hair of your head will be lost. But, he goes on, verse 20, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, instead of saying the abomination that makes desolate, he explains what it is that makes desolate. It's armies. The armies make desolate. Armies do that. They destroy things. And when armies are standing in a holy place, it's an abomination of desolation. It's an abomination of destruction, a destroying army in the holy place. Then let those in Judea flee to the mountains. These are the days of vengeance, which all things may be fulfilled. And there will be signs, verse 25, in the sun, signs in the moon, and in the stars, and on earth distress of nations and perplexity, with the sea and the waves roaring. Well, what causes the sea and the waves to roar? Tsunamis, which are caused by earthquakes. Certainly could do that. You could have typhoons. Yeah, I understand. And then as soon as you have the heavenly signs, notice the time frame. And Luke is very good about giving things in a certain time order. Verse 27, then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Now when these things begin to happen, you should not dread and think, oh yeah, well it's time for me to be martyred now. No, it's not. It says, when these things begin to happen, look up, lift up your heads, because your redemption, your salvation draws near. See, the time for the martyrdom is before the heavenly signs. That's the order. Now is the time of salvation. Messiah is coming back to save. I wanted to share with you the importance of this, because if these heavenly signs, beginning on March 20th, are the heavenly signs being referred to in the Bible, and never in history has this, or at least in our modern history, this taken place. You have blood moon last year at the festival of Sukkot, this year at Pesach, again, Sukkot. Pesach, Sukkot, twice, 2 years in a row. But this one that's coming up, very interesting, is immediately preceded by the sun going black. How much time do we have? I don't know, but I do know that the heavenly signs are a sign that the tribulation has begun. And that's only about 6 months away, if that is the sign. If God uses that, and it could qualify. It's just something to take note of. Something to take note of indeed. Now we'll go back to the book of Revelation. Revelation chapter 6. So there was the great earthquake, verse 12. The sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became like blood, verse 12. The stars of heaven fell to the earth as a fig tree drops its late figs when it's shaken by a mighty wind. The heavens will be shaken, like it says in Hebrews, I think towards the end of the chapter 12. Yet once more I will shake the heavens and the earth. Then we see the sky receded as a scroll, clearly during the tribulation period. No question now. This is not something that ever happened historically. The sky receded as a scroll when it's rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved out of its place. That's how powerful the earthquakes are going to be. Kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, the commanders and the mighty men, and every slave and every free man hid themselves in the caves and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face. This is when they first see Messiah's face. He's not on the earth, he's in the heavens. The sky receded back so that they could see. Remember Stephen, when they stoned him? He looked up and he said, oh, I see the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. The heavens opened up and he could see. That will happen right after the heavenly signs. This is pretty incredible. Pretty incredible indeed. The great day of his wrath is come, and who is able to stand? Now, after these things, I saw 4 angels, chapter 7, standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth. This is still part of the 7th seal. Okay, the next trumpet blast or the next seal, I said 7th, I meant to say 6th. This is still part of the 6th seal. So we have 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, so that the wind wouldn't blow on the earth or on the sea or on any tree. And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was granted to harm the earth and the sea, and said, hey! Don't harm the earth or the sea yet. Wait. Not until we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. You know, that's interesting that God says, we sing it, right? Shema Israel. And we sing Shema. They ask Messiah, what's the most important commandment in all of the Bible? Hear, O Israel. That's what Shema means. It means hear. Hear, O Israel, the eternal our God, the eternal is one. And you shall love the eternal your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and all of your strength. You should love God. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, speaking of them when you rise in the morning, as you go about your day, and when you lie down at night. And they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. As frontlets between your eyes. Torah. Is Torah in your seat of intellect? Do you like it? Do you love it? And you shall bind them as a sign upon your hand. So we have the beast power. He wants to put his name on people. The mark of the beast is 666. And where does he want to put his counterfeit name? On the hand and on the forehead. Shema. So I'm sharing, it's called a sod in the Hebrew, means a clue. Sharing a clue with you. And the clue is they're sealed in their foreheads with the Word of God. Torah means the Word of God. Yeshua is the Logos. Logos means the Word of God. And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. In Hebrew, it would be the Davar. The Davar, the Word. God's law. Sealed into your forehead. The Word of Messiah. Don't harm the earth. Don't harm the sea. Don't harm the trees until the servants are sealed on their foreheads. And I heard the number of those who were sealed. There was 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. Now we're going back to Matthew chapter 24. Matthew 24. Thank you for my drink. Matthew chapter 24, friends. Okay. We'll drop down for time. We see in Matthew 24, verse 15, there's the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. So he says, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Doesn't say to the whole world, doesn't say to those people in Texas, flee to the place of safety. Doesn't say those people in Oregon, flee to the place of safety. It doesn't say any such thing. It doesn't say everybody who lives out in Idaho, head to the mountains. It doesn't say that. Preachers that say that are speaking on their own behalf. They're not speaking from the Word of God. It says, let those that are in Judea flee to the mountains that are around Judea. And let him who is on the housetop in Judea not come back to take anything out of his house. It doesn't say anything about people. Obviously, you would come down to get your kids, not your possessions, because there's not time. And it gives a woe for those, not you, notice the verbiage, pray that your flight would not be in the winter or on Shabbat. For there will be great tribulation, such as not been since the beginning of the world to this time, nor ever shall be, just like it said in the book of Daniel, where we just read in chapter 12. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved, but for the elect's sake, they will be shortened. Then, verse 23, now this is going to accompany things, so please, this is important. If anyone says to you, oh, look, here's Messiah, or there, don't believe it, because what does he say? False messiahs, false prophets, false teachers will arise. And what are they going to do? They're even going to show signs and wonders so to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I've told you beforehand. Deception is going to be rampant at this time. And this deception is going to be accompanied by miracles. to really convince people. Miracles. They are going to show great signs, it says, verse 24. And wonders, so to deceive, if possible, even the elect. Now, we'll continue on. For time's sake, I'll skip down just a little bit. The tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light. Verse 29. Just prior, or as part of, we will have this incredible, intense. This is after the flight. This is after the time marker of the abomination of desolation. There's a new round of miracles that are designed to deceive. Miracles that will accompany false teachings. Then you have the heavenly signs. And there will appear the Son of Man, the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, not on the earth yet, in heaven, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds with power and great glory. And look what he does. He will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds. We just read about the four winds, remember? We read about the four winds. And here it is again in the book of Matthew, just like Daniel was mentioning. They will gather the elect from the four winds, those angels, or excuse me, it was in Revelation in chapter 7. Remember, the angels, wait, don't harm the earth or the sea. The angels of the four winds, not until we've sealed our God. Excuse me, until our God has sealed the servants of the living God on their foreheads. So the four winds are held back until the sealing is done. Here he will send his angels with a great sound of the trumpet. They will gather his elect from the four winds. It's the same event being described here as we saw in Revelation. They are parallel. Now, this incredible deception and the sealing, which is right here on the forehead, which speaks of God's law. I could take you back in the book of Deuteronomy, and I could show you not only Shema, but several places where it says regarding God's statutes, his testimony, Torah. You shall bind it as a sign upon your hand, that shall be as frontlets between your eyes. Even the high days, says it regarding the festival of Matzah. How do you know when somebody comes and preaches something to you and then here's a miracle? Well, I better believe it then because it was accompanied by a miracle. How do you know? Isaiah chapter 8. Isaiah chapter 8. I'm going to read to you what I think is the least believed passage in the Bible. I don't think hardly anyone believes this. We're going to read it nonetheless. Somehow people seem to make exceptions. I'm being facetious because I'm so amazed. But Isaiah 8 and verse 16 says, bind up the testimonies and seal Torah among my disciples. We just read about being sealed in the forehead. Seal Torah among my disciples, just like it speaks about in the book of Deuteronomy. And I will wait on the Eternal, who hides his face from the house of Jacob. Yes, he has hid for a while. I will hope in the Eternal. And when they say, verse 19 to you, oh, seek those who are mediums, and maybe you go to a medium, check your astrology, what's your sign? You want to learn about the future that way? How did it work out for Saul? Shouldn't the people seek their God? And so what does he say, verse 20? To Torah and to the testimonies. Yeah, seal Torah, seal the testimonies in. To the Torah and to the testimonies. If they do not speak according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. And that's the part just strikes me that people really don't believe it. Because many will continue to sit before the feet of those who teach. Many will continue to sit before those who teach, and they have no idea what the statutes are, if they're even in effect anymore, what the testimonies are. They don't speak according to Torah. They speak a completely different message. But they're different, though. My minister is good. There is light in this church or that place, and I go here, and I like to watch it on TV, and, it's really a good... And they will continue to put themselves before the feet of teachers who do not teach the testimonies and do not teach Torah. And they will continue to put themselves before and sit at their feet and learn. But there's no light in them. And how do you think Satan deceives? How does he deceive? A little at a time. A little at a time. So when the deceptive messages begin to come, and they're accompanied by miracles, the only thing we're going to be able to do is test and see, well, are they teaching Torah? Are they teaching God's commandments don't really matter that much, or even worse, like most do, that they really are done away with? Are you going to have light? You're not going to have light. Let me see how good my memory is working. I think, let's try Deuteronomy chapter 13. Yes, thank you, Lord. Deuteronomy chapter 13 and verse 1. If there arises among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and he gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder comes to pass, whoa, makes predictions, they even come to pass, which he spoke to you, saying, let us go after other gods, which you have not known, or let us serve them. There are many ways to go after other gods without bowing down and worshiping a God that has a different name. Elijah taught that. The people worship God and they worship Baal at the same time, remember? You shall not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer, because the eternal your God is testing you to know whether you love Yahweh your God with all of your heart and with all of your soul. You shall walk after the eternal your God and fear him and keep his commandments and obey his voice and serve him and hold fast to him. To Torah and to the testimonies. If they don't speak according to that word, I don't care how many miracles they perform. There's no light in them, and they're sent there to deceive you or to test you. This is part of the sixth seal. Incredible deception, accompanied by miracles, accompanied by a great earthquake that we will have to watch for, accompanied by the sun going black, accompanied by the moon going red, accompanied or preceded by the sacrifices being stopped. The sacrifices have to be started before they can be stopped. Time is short, friends. Time is very short. Next time, God willing, I will pick it up. I'd like to talk a little bit about the two witnesses, because the two witnesses, the work of the two witnesses starts exactly 3 days and 3 nights before the tribulation begins. So we've got a couple of time markers. We have the sacrifices being stopped 30 days before the tribulation, but we have the work of the two witnesses begins 3 days before the tribulation. some interesting things accompany the work of the two witnesses that are happening in the world that take place simultaneously. We'll explore that next time, God willing, and a little bit more about how long Yeshua is seen in the heavens before he comes down to the earth. It's a long time, and I'll show you that right out of the words of your Bible as well, God willing, next time.